working on Ardmore Station up near the Isa. It was a steamboat station at that time. It was just on dusk, and we were sort of sitting around having dinner. We were sort of sitting on our swags with a plate on our knee, sort of thing. The cook had a caravan in the camp. He had a border collie pup tied up under the van. This dog just literally started screaming its head off, and I've never heard a dog yelp like it. It was just horrific. We all looked over, and this thing was standing in front of it. We were all looking at its back. You couldn't really see the dog, but it wasn't moving. Like the Yowie wasn't moving. Didn't seem to be attacking it. It was just standing there, and then the dog was silent. It was just, you could hear a pin drop. This thing sort of loped off side on, and like my view was side on, and the dog was dead. And I believe the dog just died of fright. I think its heart gave out.
This was on a station in...
Yeah, on a 2,000 square mile cattle station. That's 1,768,000 acres. The location is between Mount Isa and Dajara. You'd have a pretty good idea where Mount Isa is.
Mm.
I was working there as a Jackeroo. I was employed by Steamboat Pastoral Company. There was about 12 of us. There was a few blackfellas, a few Aboriginals there, and some other white ringers. But yeah, we all saw it. It was on dusk. It was probably around this time of the year. I think at a rough guess, it was probably around September, October. So I'm thinking it must have been around sort of 6 p.m.
And this was in 1979?
1979, yes. And I'll tell you a really freaky thing about that. The same day it happened, I got a letter from my mum. Now, she had cut out a story, an article from the Women's Weekly, and put it in the letter. Now, she had no way of knowing that I was camped in exactly the same place as this story took place. But the story was about a camp, at some men that were camped at the 8 Mile camp on Ardmore Station, exactly the same place, back in the 1950s. And this was in this article that she sent me in her letter. Now, apparently they were sleeping in tents, like 2 men to a tent. One of these guys was called Roy. He was an Aboriginal Chinese guy. His mate woke up in the middle of the night, and Roy was screaming his head off, and he was disappearing under the side of the tent. Now, I'm getting goosebumps telling you this. Mm. His mate grabbed his shoulders and started pulling back the other way to hold, like it was a tug-of-war between whatever had him and his mate. And his mate won. His mate pulled him back into the tent, but his legs were cut to ribbons, almost down to the bone. So that was the story in this article. And I got that story, I got that article in a letter from my mum the exact same day as we had the Yowie experience.
Did that letter arrive before your experience or after?
Hours before, a couple of hours before.
Just take me through what you were all doing and who first noticed it. How did it come to your attention, and how far was the animal from you?
The animal was possibly only about 30 feet from me. It came to my attention because the dog was yelping. And we all looked up, like this dog was literally screaming, and we all sort of looked, and here was this thing standing in front of it. We were having dinner. I was sitting on my swag. I had an enamel plate on my knee. Yeah, we were eating. Yeah, here was this thing. It's like a small ape. Brown, long brown hair, and it was standing in front of this dog, and we couldn't really see the dog because of the Yowie. Then, this dog was literally screaming its head off, and then it was just dead silent.
How tall do you think this animal was?
Not that tall. From what the blackfellas told me up there, they called it Junjari. They say there's 2 different types. They say the big one, there's a big tall one, and they call that, he's like a herbivore, he's a plant eater. But the little one, this Janjari, they call him the meat eater. They reckon they're the ones to look out for. They're the ones you don't want to get, you want to, not get involved with. But that's what they were saying, and they were calling it a Janjari. And they tracked it for a little while, and then they reckon the tracks just stopped, nothing. Yeah, it's my belief that they're interdimensional. I really think that they can sort of come into our world and then disappear back into theirs.
You said it was small, but, I mean, how tall do you think this thing was?
It's hard to say because it was stooped over. It wasn't standing straight. Like a chimp or an ape would run with its knuckles dragging on the ground. So it had that sort of stoop. If it was straight, probably 5 foot. Say it wasn't skinny like a rake, but it wasn't big like a gorilla either. It was solid, but there was a lot of hair on it. Brown hair, long brown hair. Definitely a darker brown, like a kelpie colour, like a red kelpie colour. It was longish hair. It was thick. Yeah, longer than a bear's hair. If you were sort of looking at a long-haired border collie, about that length.
How long did you have it in view for, do you think?
It sort of seemed a bit like slow motion. It probably happened a lot quicker. I mean, there was this initially, standing in front of the dog, and then it sort of, after the dog was dead, it stopped, yelping. It just sort of loped off. It didn't look at us. We were right there, but it didn't look at us. And the blackfellas were saying that's, it's really rare for them to show themselves in front of white people. They said, we see them all the time, but for it to show itself in front of white people was really, really rare.
So what was the general discussion? It lopes off. Then what was the discussion that went around the group? Because there was quite a few of you there. What was the reaction? Tell me what happened.
Everybody was sort of speechless, and we were all just looking at each other and jaws dropped and more goggle-eyed and like, what the bloody hell was that? But, the blackfellas were saying that Janjari, and the dog, we went over and the dog was dead. And so, that was one of the first things. We checked out the dog. I can't remember, this is 1979, I can't remember the exact conversation, but I know, we went to look at the dog, and then there were a couple of the blokes there, a couple of blackfellas there, they sort of started following tracks. They tracked it for a little while, and they reckon that the tracks just stopped. It was like, there was nothing more. I didn't hear any sound from it, or a smell. I do recall several weeks later, I had to go back through that area with a mob of horses because we used to walk cattle like 2,000-3,000 head at a time from one end of the station down to the other. What had happened was the horse tailer had quit. A horse tailer just basically looks after the horses, so he doesn't drive the cattle with everyone else. He's driving the horses. He's walking the horses home. So that's what I was doing. I had 50 horses. I had to basically go straight back through where that camp was. I could feel it. Hey, it was like chills were going up my back and every hair was standing on end on my head. It was just, I couldn't get out of there quick enough, and the horses were reacting. They were all stirred up and, wanting to gallop off, and just went real spooky. That was, weeks later, possibly a month later. I'm not sure. I'm guessing on that. But
was there much discussion with the owners of the station, or was it mentioned beyond the 12 people?
No. When you're living and working with a lot of blackfellas too, that they sort of talk about incidents, things like that all the time. Really, for tribal or half-tribal Aboriginals, that's not so rare. It kind of, I guess, didn't get the attention that it might have in a more in an area like Victoria or something like that, you know.
Did the Aboriginals tell you much else apart from that it was Djangari and, were they excited when they saw it?
Yes, and they talked about times they'd seen them before. That related to a whole lot of stories about other sightings of them. But they reckon that was Djangari, the meat eater. Have you heard that word before?
Yes, I have, yeah. Can you describe how it moved when it was walking? Was it walking like a human, striding?
It wasn't straight, it was more bent over. It was sort of, a bit like with the knuckles dragging on the ground sort of thing. It was sort of, how a chimp or an orangutan will sort of stoop? So, yeah, it was a bit like that. It wasn't standing with a straight spine. It was sort of hunched over in the shoulders. It had a bit of an ambling sort of a trot, I guess, like someone jogging fast.